What if I told you that a man spent years honoring the grave of someone he personally helped kill, not out of guilt, not out of obligation, but out of respect? In 1948, a young widow in occupied Germany discovered something impossible. A former enemy soldier had been secretly visiting her husband's grave every single week. The twist? He was the one who called in the artillery strike that ended her husband's life. This isn't a story about war strategy. It's about what happens after the war ends, when uniforms come off, when orders stop, when the noise fades, and memory is all that remains. But here's the question I want you thinking about while you watch. If you were in her position, and you discovered the man responsible for your husband's death had been quietly honoring him for years, would you confront him, forgive him, or tell him to never come back? Don't answer yet. Watch what happened next, and then I want your honest opinion in the comments. I'm genuinely curious where you stand. Okay, so on April 12, 1948, Lüneburg in the British occupation zone of Germany. Anna Weber knelt in front of a simple wooden cross, her fingers working carefully through the damp soil as she pulled away small weeds that had grown overnight. The cemetery was quiet, too quiet for a place that held 80 unfinished stories. For 3 years, she had come here every Sunday. Same path, same grave, same silence. Her husband, Friedrich Weber, lay beneath that wooden marker. She was 24 when she lost him. That morning, as Anna brushed dirt from the carved name, she sensed someone watching. An elderly woman stood a few steps behind her, thin, wrapped in a dark coat, observing, not intruding. "I need to tell you something," the woman said softly in German. Anna looked up. "You are not the only one who comes here for your husband." That made no sense. The cemetery was mostly empty during the week. Families came on Sundays, if they came at all. The war had scattered people across borders, ruins, and mass graves. Many never found where their loved ones were buried. But Anna had. To understand why this moment felt impossible, we have to go back 3 years. March 15, 1945. The war in Europe was collapsing in on itself. Cities were burning, supply lines were broken, soldiers were exhausted on every side. Friedrich Weber commanded an infantry company positioned near the Ilmenau River, defending the northern approaches toward Hamburg. By then, Germany's defeat was inevitable, but fighting continued, often with desperate intensity. That afternoon, British armored units pushed through the defensive lines near Lüneburg. The battle lasted roughly 6 hours. Artillery fire struck Friedrich's position shortly after 2:30 p.m. He did not survive. His body was recovered by British troops advancing through the area. His identification papers were intact. Following military burial procedures at the time, he was interred in a small cemetery established for German soldiers killed in the final weeks of fighting, men whose families could not yet be located in the chaos of collapse. There were no speeches, no family present, just a wooden cross and a record in a logbook. Anna received the telegram on April 2, 1945. The war had not yet officially ended. She remembered the paper trembling in her hands more clearly than the words themselves. They had been married 3 years. He had been conscripted in 1942. Most of their marriage had existed in letters. By May 1945, Germany surrendered. Lüneburg became part of the British occupation zone. Weeks later, Anna traveled there for the first time. The cemetery was smaller than she imagined. About 80 graves arranged in disciplined rows, each marked by wood, each identical. She had to request permission to enter. Visiting hours were restricted. The British administration maintained the grounds, but access was controlled. Still, they allowed her in. And so began a ritual that would shape the next 3 years of her life. Through the hunger winter of 1946, through ration cards and coal shortages, through the slow, uncertain rebuilding of a defeated nation, every Sunday. Flowers when she could find them, hands in the soil when she could not. Friedrich had grown up in Hamburg. His family home had been destroyed during air raids. There was no one else left to tend his grave. She believed she was the only one who remembered him, until April 12, 1948. The elderly woman introduced herself as Frau Schultz, 72 years old, widowed in the previous war decades earlier. She walked past the cemetery most mornings. "I have seen him," she said quietly, "every Wednesday, early." Anna frowned. "Seen who?" "A British man, not in uniform, sometimes civilian clothes, always alone." That didn't register. "He goes to your husband's grave," Frau Schultz continued. "He stands there for several minutes. Sometimes he leaves flowers." Anna's first reaction wasn't anger. It was confusion. Why would a British man visit Friedrich's grave? They had fought on opposite sides. They had never met, at least as far as she knew. Frau Schultz had been observing this for nearly 2 years. Same day, same grave, same quiet visit. That detail unsettled Anna the most. Not random, not mistaken, intentional. So she decided to see it herself. Wednesday, April 14th, 1948. She arrived before sunrise, earlier than she ever had. The gate was unlocked, no guards in sight. The cemetery existed in that strange space between war and peace, maintained but not closely watched. She waited near the entrance. At 7:45 a.m., a man approached on foot from town, mid-30s perhaps, dressed plainly, carrying a small bundle of wildflowers, not formal, not ceremonial, just something gathered. He didn't hesitate. He walked straight to Friedrich Weber's grave, kneeled, placed the flowers gently against the wooden cross, and bowed his head. Not hurried, not performative, just stillness. For nearly 10 minutes he remained there. Anna watched from a distance, her heartbeat steady but heavy. When he finally stood and walked away, he didn't look around. He didn't seem afraid of being seen. He headed toward the British administrative offices in town. Anna followed, not out of suspicion, but because she needed to understand one thing. Why would a former enemy return week after week to honor the man he once fought against? And more importantly, what had happened between them? When the man exited the British administrative building nearly 2 hours later, Anna stepped forward. "Excuse me," she said carefully in German. "You've been visiting my husband's grave." He stopped. For a moment, he looked almost relieved that the silence between them had finally broken. "You're Mrs. Weber," he said, his German slow but understandable. "Yes." They walked to a small park bench nearby, away from the main road. Up close, he seemed younger than she expected, mid-30s, tired eyes, the kind that had seen too much too early. "My name is Thomas Wright," he said, "formerly Sergeant, British Army. I'm working here now as a civilian contractor." She waited. "I was there," he continued quietly, "March 15th, 1945, the fighting near the river." Anna's chest tightened. "I was attached to the artillery observer team. We relayed coordinates for fire support. Your husband's company was holding that position." He didn't soften it. "We were ordered to neutralize it." The word hung between them. Neutralize. War language. Clinical. Detached. But the consequence had a name. Friedrich. Anna felt the cold settle into her hands. After a long pause, Wright continued. When the fighting ended, we recovered the fallen. Your husband was found at what appeared to be his command post. He hadn't withdrawn. He was still positioned where he could direct his men. He looked at her directly. Our captain at the time believed that deserved proper burial. He said that whatever side we were on, discipline and courage should be recognized. Anna's voice was steady when she asked the question that mattered. You visit because you killed him? Wright shook his head. I visit because I remember him. Silence again. Not as an enemy, he added, as a soldier who did what he was ordered to do, the same as I did. He glanced toward the cemetery. The war made us opponents, but it ended. He is buried far from home. Someone should remember that he lived, that he mattered. For 3 years, Anna had believed she was the only person carrying Friedrich's memory forward. She had built her grief around that certainty. Now she learned that the man who had called in the artillery strike had been quietly honoring him for nearly 2 years. Why Wednesdays? She asked. It's my day off, he replied. I returned to Germany in late 1946 for reconstruction work. When I came back to Lüneburg, I searched for the cemetery. I found his grave. I've been coming since December. Anna didn't know how to categorize this. It wasn't guilt in the dramatic sense. It wasn't apology. It wasn't friendship. It was something quieter, recognition. Do you have family? She asked after a while. A wife in England, he said. No children. I have no one, Anna replied. Friedrich was all I had. Over the following months, their visits overlapped occasionally. She kept her Sundays, he kept his Wednesdays. Sometimes they arrived at the same time and sat on the bench near the entrance. They spoke about the battle, carefully, without embellishment. Wright described the advance orders, the confusion, the chaos of collapsing lines. He admitted that after the shelling stopped, he had walked through the position and been struck by how young many of the fallen looked. Anna spoke about letters from the front, how they grew shorter over time, about their 1942 wedding, about the telegram that had reduced her world to a single sentence. There was no attempt to rewrite history between them. They didn't justify the war. They didn't glorify it. They spoke about survival, about rebuilding, about the strange reality that one man had died and the other had lived, largely because of timing and chance. By autumn 1948, Wright's reconstruction contract was ending. He would return to England in November. On his final Wednesday visit, November 3rd, Anna was already there. I wanted to say goodbye, he said. She nodded. Thank you, she replied, for remembering him. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small photograph. It showed the cemetery rows in morning light, Friedrich's cross visible among them. I took this last week, Wright said, so I won't forget. You'll remember a German soldier? Anna asked softly, even back in England? I'll remember that we were both men placed in the same machinery, he said. One died, one didn't. That difference says more about circumstance than about worth. He paused. He deserves to be remembered by both of us. Wright left Lüneburg later that month and returned to Yorkshire. He resumed civilian life, work, routine, the quiet tasks of rebuilding normalcy. He never returned to Germany, but every Wednesday morning at 7:45, around the time he once knelt at the grave, he stopped whatever he was doing and observed 2 minutes of silence. Anna continued her Sunday visits until 1965, when illness made the journey too difficult. By then, the cemetery had been transferred to German administration and reorganized into a consolidated memorial site for the fallen. Friedrich's original wooden cross was replaced. His name remained. Anna passed away in 1967. She requested to be buried facing southeast, toward the direction where the military cemetery had once stood. Thomas Wright died in 1972 in England. According to family accounts, the photograph of the cemetery was placed among his personal belongings at his request. This story matters not because it erases what happened. It doesn't. It doesn't excuse war. It doesn't simplify loss. What it does is complicate the narrative. It reminds us that history is rarely divided into pure villains and pure heroes. Often it is filled with individuals carrying out orders within systems far larger than themselves. And sometimes the quietest acts, like kneeling at a grave once a week, say more about humanity than the battles ever could. Two people, opposite sides of a battlefield, connected forever by a single moment neither of them could undo. One lost his life, one lived with the memory, and years later they shared something neither of them expected: recognition. Not as enemies, not as symbols of nations, but as human beings caught inside a war bigger than either of them. So now I want to hear from you. Was Thomas Wright honoring Friedrich or trying to make peace with himself? Was Anna right to accept his visits, or would you have drawn a line? And here's the real question. Do you believe former enemies can truly respect each other after something like this? Drop your answer below, and don't just say yes or no. Tell me why. I read the comments, and the debates on stories like this are always powerful. Also, tell me where you're watching from. It's fascinating seeing how perspectives differ depending on country and background. History isn't just about dates. It's about how we choose to remember. Let's talk about it.